I am very honored to speak on behalf of Bangladesh Indigenous Youth Forum and would like to thank you and UN Voluntary Fund for Indigenous Peoples for the opportunity to highlight on the human rights situations of indigenous peoples of Bangladesh. Indigenous peoples of Bangladesh are regular victims of human rights violations. Very often, indigenous peoples are being evicted from their ancestral land in the name of development aggression, tourism industries, and rubber industries. And very recently, border road projects in Chittagong Hill Tracts and Plainland districts. Traditional land are often taken away without consent of indigenous peoples. The land grabbing scenario of indigenous peoples in Bangladesh miserably depressing. Recently, indigenous peoples are threatened by the state agencies to be evicted from their ancestral land in Madhupur, Tangail, plainland of Bangladesh. Following a gazette notification by the government declaring 9,145 acres of core indigenous land and territories as reserve forest and so-called ecotourism project without taking any prior and informed consent of indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples' lands are illegally grabbed by the state agencies for the tourism complex and rest house construction in Plainland and Chittagong Hill Tracts for the project of sustainable forest and livelihood project, Sufal project. Besides, tea companies and other state agencies are forcefully occupying indigenous people's land in Greater Sylhet region and Dinajpur of Bangladesh. Madam Chair, human rights defenders are threatened to be criminalized, false case, arbitrary arrest and detention due to their active voice against human rights violations and injustice. So the situation is much more vulnerable. In these cases, due to the land-related conflicts, indigenous women, adolescents, girls are targeted, sexually harassed, raped, killed for any kind of incidents happens in Bangladesh. We protest against these gross human rights violations and demand justice. To dispense justice to all these human rights violations is non-existent in Bangladesh due to the respect for indigenous peoples, governance systems, and laws and practices. So, in this context, we urge UN Permanent Forum and on indigenous peoples to highlight the following recommendations. I urge Bangladesh government to stop all human rights violations against women and so-called development projects such as ecotourism, eco park, reserve forest, military camp on indigenous peoples' land and territories without consent of indigenous peoples. I urge Bangladesh governments to create separate land commission for plainland indigenous peoples and to guarantee the full implementation of CST Accord. I urge UN bodies to conduct country visits to assess the actual ground situations and provide recommendations to member states. And lastly, I recommend for a framework and mechanism to guarantee all these rights. Thank you, Madam Chair.